Welcome to the No More Late Fees podcast. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Jackie, and we're just two best friends and ex-Blockbuster employees rewatching some of the best and worst movies of the late 90s and early 2000s. And this week we are talking about the film Drumline with our guests TC and Ceej from Brum Meets World. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
If you want to get to know TC and Ceej a little better, pause and check out their trailer and then come back for Drumline. But before we dive in, let's get into some housekeeping. If you love the podcast and you want to support us, here are a few ways that you can.
Did you know that writing us a review or rating us helps us get more listeners? If you want to be featured and help us grow, head to Apple, Spotify, Podchasers, or your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review.
And if you like what you hear and want to buy us a virtual cup of coffee, head over to ko-fi.com/no-more-late-fees.
And we've got merch. We've got shirts, shower curtains, even something for the dog. Head to nomorelatefees.redbubble.com and check out all the cool stuff that we've got lined up. We've got our logo. We have some fun sayings from our episodes. Definitely worth a look and a click and a buy. Okay.
Shower curtains. Y'all ain't messing around.
I saw that you guys
clicking yes to everything that Redbubble has. It's fine.
I saw that you guys launched your merch. It's so beautiful. It really it pops.
Yeah, we're very excited. We just got into the merch game. A little late, but we're excited to be there.
We were like, oh wait, everybody's doing merch. What have we been doing?
All right. So set against the high energy, high stakes world of show style marching bands, Drumline is a fish out of water comedy about a talented street drummer from Harlem who enrolls in a Southern university, expecting to lead its marching band's drumline to victory. He initially flounders in his new world before realizing that it takes more than talent to reach the top. It stars Nick Cannon, Zoe Saldana, Orlando Jones, Leonard Roberts, and Jason Weaver. It was directed by Charles Stone III. It was written by Tina Gordon Chisholm and Sean Sheps. And you can currently watch it on Disney Plus. Can you? Because I bought this.
I
watched it on Disney Plus.
I absolutely watched it on Disney Plus.
I figured you. I was like, because I left my Disney Plus on your TV. No,
I have Disney Plus because I always just go to IMDb and it tells me where to stream it. And it was like two of the ones where you had to watch commercials, and I didn't have time for that. So it was $5 on Prime to buy. So I ended up buying it.
I always Google it, and then it tells me like where I can watch it. And I saw Disney Plus, but we're going to have to get better at this.
This is why y'all have to sell merch.
So before we start, let's get into our ratings rewind.
So you know the drill. Before we get into the movie, we'll reveal the rating our Y2K versions of ourselves would give. And then at the end, we'll see if our current selves agree with our initial rating. Our scale consists of would buy it again.
The best would play on repeat.
5-day rental.
Would watch again.
2-day rental.
Okay, but nothing to write home about.
Same-day rental.
Trash, straight up offbeat trash.
Like Bethune-Cookman. Anywho, let's move to the ratings. I had to say it once. I won't say any more trash talk after that.
I don't believe you, but that's okay.
You're good to know me. I doubt any Bethune-Cookman people are listening to the show anyways.
Talk your shit. Let them know what's up.
There are rivals.
We can say what we want.
You're in
but
charge.
I fully support them as an HBCU.
Yes.
They're just not as good as your HBCU, and it's okay that they know that.
Thank you.
They ain't paying your bills.
They ain't paying theirs. Okay, moving on.
TC, what was your Y2K rating of Drumline?
You know, I didn't know at what point I should reveal this, but I haven't seen this movie since it came out. So I really don't have a close relationship with the movie. So I'm going to say that probably my Y2K self thought of it as a maybe 2-day rental, because it definitely didn't leave a lasting impression for me specifically.
Ceej?
Mine was would buy it again. I enjoyed it for the time when it first came out. And yeah, I have thoughts, but yeah, I think it was would buy it again.
Jackie?
So there was a period of time when I was working at Blockbuster where I just bought everything. And so it was like I watched it once and it was decent, and so I would buy it. And so when we get into the movies like after like 2001, my would buy it gets a little skewed, but I will say I own Drumline and maybe watched it once or twice. It was not heavy rotation. So I'll go 5-day rental. Like I liked it enough to buy it, but then I didn't really watch it after that.
It was a would buy for me. It was a would buy for me when this movie came out. I want to say I was in my sophomore year of college at Florida A&M University, and this was huge. This movie was like an experience for our school, for everyone at that time, because a lot of the kids at my school who played it in the Marching 100, which I have on my shirt right here, they played in the fictional band. And it was almost like the movie was telling the experience I was living at the time. So it was very culturally relevant to me at that time. I did buy it on DVD. How many times did I watch it afterwards? Not many. I wasn't a huge Cannonball.
Really?
I
That's
wasn't.
surprising.
I wasn't. So like there were, but I still liked it. Anywho, that's my history with it. Let's get into
some box office deets.
Yes. So this movie had a budget of $20 million and it made $57.6 million worldwide. I was able to find a oral history of the entire making of this movie by the entire cast on a website, and it was so cool and interesting to see like the entire process. So the premise of this movie is actually based on Dallas Austin's like experience. He pitched this movie. It was his idea. It's about his life, but it's about his high school experience. He was in a high school band. And if you don't know who Dallas Austin is, he's a huge, prolific music producer. If you remember TLC's Fan Mail, that CD, life-changing, he produced that. He ended up being with Chili and being her baby daddy. So the experiences of this movie were very important to him. He came up with the concept and he tried to pitch it. And it had been in pitching hell for a while. He pitched it to Fox originally, and it just kind of sat there like nothing happened. And then, people will ask him like, what happened to that movie? So he ended up talking to Quincy Jones, and Quincy Jones, after the show, I'll tell you what Quincy Jones said. It's written, and I'm shocked that Dallas Austin said what Quincy Jones said, but I'm not going to say it on the podcast.
Quincy Jones does not hold his tongue.
He does not.
By the way, reading
not.
any interview with Quincy Jones is always fascinating because he'll just give it to you straight.
Very politically incorrect. But he gave some advice. Dallas took it. He got a new producer to help him pitch it. And I think they had a new studio head at the time, and they loved it. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And the studio head actually said, let's change it from being a high school movie to a college movie. Like, let's make it about being in college. And that actually was great. Turned out to be one of the best choices that they made. The problem was the studio also felt like there had to be a white person, a white main character added to the script, or because originally they felt like they needed the 20 million to make the movie. The studio wanted to give them $15 million. And even to get the 15 million, they were like, you need to have a white cast main character. Like, white audiences are going to see this, and this is turning into a Black movie once they kind of got through the gist of it.
I just really quickly. So you're saying that the entire cast, including Orlando, was worth 15, but GQ alone was worth 5?
Yeah. And I think they were really smart in the way that they casted GQ, because GQ is white adjacent. I mean, if you said to GQ that he was white, I don't even know if that would download with him because honestly, he's half. Is he Pakistani?
Yeah, no, he looks like he's, as you said, white adjacent.
Yeah,
Some.
like I
Yeah.
think one of his parents is from Pakistan, and I hope I pronounced that properly. But yeah, and he's got a lot of flavor to him. We had him on the show. If you have not listened to the episode, you should go back and listen to our interview with him. He was amazing, and he gave us so many fun facts about this movie and other movies that he was on, and just his like musical skills, because he's a musician as well. So anywho, yeah, they made them write a white character into this movie, but
he is half Pakistani.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, and he was down, like he was a part of that cast, and they were able to have him in there but not center him. But I think if you go back and look at some of the promos, I feel like he is more of a prominent face in the promos than in the actual movie. And I think the thing that is kind of similar is what happened in Bring It On, which we're going to be doing.
I was going to say the reverse of Bring It On.
Because they ended up doing some extra promos, because listen to our Bring It On episode. I'll tell you guys about that.
Yeah.
Anywho, so
well,
again,
can I just quickly say about that tidbit? You know, when I go back and I watch classic Black movies, Boys in the Hood, New Jack City, Set It Off, I'm like, I need at least one white character in this movie. Otherwise, I can't connect to it. And so, like, I get where the studio was coming from, because I need a little bit of mayonnaise on my sandwich, you know?
Right. Well, it's like crazy to me that they were like, we don't want to, it's turning into a Black movie. It is a Black movie.
It is
about a Black
movie.
college, a historical
It's
Black
turning
college.
into a Black movie. You know, the one at the HBCU.
But Dallas Austin said, this is not a Black movie. It's a story. Yeah. This is a story.
We have this conversation all the time because we watch a lot of television. And I believe, like, in a television or a movie, all you need is two Black people for it to be considered like a diverse movie.
Mm-hmm.
But one is diverse. Two is like, oh, more than two, and it's a Black production. Right. More than two Black characters in a movie, no matter how big the cast is, and it's considered a Black movie. And that is insanity.
But, you know, I have to say, is it a chicken or an egg situation, right? Is it that we're that people are conditioned this way to think this way, or is it that they're thinking this way and they're like, we've got to cater to that? Because when I think about it, there are so many movies that I know in my lexicon, because I'm Black, and I'm like, of course I'm going to see Black movies, but there are a lot of Black movies that white people wouldn't even think to see, don't even know they exist. It's like there's a blind spot to it for them, and
correct,
they're like, I didn't even know. Like, there's sometimes even on our Instagram, I'll post certain things like very classic movies. I don't even want to say Black movies, just classic movies, and people are like, never seen it, don't know what this is. And I'm just like, how is this possible? You know
what? I think something to that is that it felt like, even though, you know, there was so much Black content available for like us in the 90s, it all kind of felt like there were similar stories being told. Mm-hmm. You know, like that whole concept of like hood movies is basically what, the late 80s to like the mid 90s. Like, yeah. that kind of sums up so many what people would consider to be Black films. But nowadays, I feel like we've really stepped away from this monolith narrative. And now it's like, well, Black Panther is a Black movie and Moonlight is a Black movie. Like, they can just be so many different things now. And I think that audiences are becoming at least more diverse in general. So I think that there's more of the public maybe open to these things. And I think there's more diverse storytellers who are saying, hey, we're not just one thing either. And I think that allows, more, I guess, non people of color to kind of see these experiences as really rich and interesting. But I would say that any hood movie from the 90s, any classic one, is probably just as good as any drama that Scorsese put out in the last 10 years. So
Agreed.
like, it really just, you have to kind of open yourself up to those things as well.
Yeah, I think those movies were kind of forced into a category because the studios were like, oh, well, Boys in the Hood did well. We've got to keep making these. And we're okay with making these because it fits the narrative that we're trying to push. But I think a lot of really good creators, directors, writers were able to make their stories their own. And now we can look back at them and say, like, these are very deep and rich movies beyond just the environment. But I do also like that because of those movies, we do have in the late 90s, early 2000s, we have this Black Renaissance where you have movies like The Best Man and The Wood and even Drumline, where a lot of Black people were saying, you know what, our stories of, us living our lives and being successful are not being shown on the big screen at all. I think we were seeing it on TV. We had a lot of Black characters and Black families like would start kicking off with like the Cosby Show and kind of moving in that direction, but we weren't seeing it on the big screen. So I do love this time period where we got really, I felt like a suburban kid that I was seeing myself in some of these where I couldn't necessarily always relate in movies that was not my experience.
Exactly. I think, like, to me, it's about universal storytelling. What kind of like feeling it, like what parts of the story are universal and can be felt by anyone. And like we had joked previously in the trailer, but like when I think of Save the Last Dance, do you consider that a Black movie? Because I consider that an MTV movie. Like when I think about it, I was like, it has a large Black cast and one white star. So I wonder who considers that a Black movie?
Because the protagonist is a white girl, seeing Blackness through her point of view.
She's centered, and it's just like why Remember the Titans is not a Black movie.
Yeah.
Because that is a movie about race, but it is digestible for white people. Whenever you have a movie that is literally a fictional tale of something that really happened about racism, but white people are like, I love that movie, it's not a Black movie.
But have you seen The Blind Side though? Because I don't know that fits for that one.
I guess to me, like I'm just thinking about all of the movies. Like Set It Off for me is another one where it's like that's just a good heist movie. Yes. And I think that some people may consider that a Black movie, but it's like no, like that's like so many of those things are just beat for beat a heist movie. Mm-hmm. The characters are Black, but like you should be able to enjoy it as just a heist movie.
But as Black people, we know it's just a movie. We obviously we might gravitate more towards it because we have our own system, which is great. Segue back into this movie, which is based at an HBCU, which is a historically Black college or university, which is something that had to be made because there weren't colleges and universities available to Black people when they wanted to go for higher learning. The same thing could be said about Hollywood movies. We have our own Black Hollywood. We have Black famous because we had to make our own avenues because it wasn't available per se, but they are just movies. But going back to the white lens, because they're not centered, it is very rare that the larger consensus of white people will see some of these movies, like Set It Off. I could say Set It Off to a bunch of people and that are white, and most likely a lot of them aren't going to even know what that movie is.
Same with Soul Food, which is just a great family movie. It's just a great family drama movie.
So now that we have a warm entry into Drumline, so we know who got this movie greenlit. Just like the whole process of casting was interesting as well. I just want to say this: Silk the Shocker apparently was offered the role of Devin, played by Nick Cannon, but turned it down due to creative differences.
I wonder what they were. I have to know what they were.
What leg you got to stand on, Silk the Shocker?
Let me tell you, the way I was sweating that man, okay?
Really?
I really thought out of the No Limit
Really?
soldiers, that was my boy right there.
Okay.
I want to hear your top 5 of all the No Limit soldiers. I love that you had like a ranking. You were like, out of all of them, I want the Shock.
But he, like, when they came out, he was the cute one. I don't know what the other ones were looking like, but I was like, oh, he looks cute. I like him. And he used to have like an open shirt sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. You had to have that
Vibes.
open shirt.
Yeah.
What a different timeline it would have been had he took it and he took over Nick Cannon's life. Silk the Shocker on Wildin' Out, who knows?
The host of The Masked Singer.
Yeah.
Still going by Silk the Shocker in his old age.
Exactly.
But the other names that just really that were up for Devin were some of the notes said that Lil Wayne and T.I. were up for the role. But here's the thing.
I can see T.I. I can see
T.I. for sure.
They weren't up for the role. They auditioned. I just like to change the verbiage a little bit. They auditioned.
That makes a big difference.
It does.
Yeah.
Speaking of audition, it was down to Zoe Saldana and Kerry Washington, which first of all, absolutely, if you are in Hollywood at that time, this is the market that you're shopping in.
Yeah.
And it is Kerry Washington or Zoe Saldana. I say this because I've been waiting to say, this is the blackest role Zoe Saldana does in her entire career. I was like, has she been around this many black people since?
Okay. I'm glad you brought this up because I was like, don't do it, Danielle, but I'm going to do it. So
you're talking about Nina Simone, right?
No, I'm not getting there yet. But I will say this: if you the oral history that I read, and she is being interviewed during that, just the verbiage and some of the things that she says about her getting this role and how she talks about it.
Spill the tea. Spill the tea.
You can
I'm
read
gonna say
between the lines.
Right off the bat. I'm just gonna say it because if you have Kerry Washington or Zoe Saldana, the moment I saw Zoe Saldana in the group of friends that they put her in, I'm like, oh, she's the lightest one. And it's like almost it's like she's set up for Nick Cannon to be like, and who would you be choosing within this group?
I think it definitely a hair factor for sure. But the director did say Kerry, this is what he said. Kerry was too polished, like way too polished. And I think when you read between the lines, her acting caliber in comparison to like a Nick Cannon, definitely, I could not believe that he was going to get her. I hate to say it, but
you know what? Now that you say that, like, I would need a different lead if Kerry Washington was in the movie. I do not believe that he could spit game to her. Zoe Saldana, is she fresh off of Crossroads in this?
Yeah, because that came out in 2001. Yeah, and Center Stage. So one of the things she complained about was that she's a trained ballerina, a trained classical dancer, and she just was trying to get away from dancing roles, and this was a dancing role. But she spoke to the fact that she was glad she was a part of this movie because it's such a important part of American history that needed to be told. But she, had a hard time in the beginning when they were doing dancing because it's very different than classical dancing and of the Southern African American experience. Yes, this is the blackest movie that she's been in, but also I have a problem with her talking about being in, like, now that she has the clout that she has and where she's at, she kind of complains about the fact that she's never been able to be in a movie that represents who she is as an Afro-Latina, but she doesn't clarify that in a way because she has all these roles that could have gone to African-American actresses and had no problem with that. So I get a little side eye about her relationship to that kind of thing. It's giving I Know Black vibes.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, and that's why I had to bring up the Nina Simone conversation, because that was the major complaint with her being casted as Nina Simone, was that she is so light-skinned, she's Afro-Latina, and that she didn't have the, Nina Simone is a classically dark-skinned woman.
Right.
So it was definitely rubbed people the wrong way. And yeah, and here's the thing. As an Afro-Latino, I would say that it's nice to have our own people to cheer for, and it's nice to have our own community. I was telling Ceej that, like, it wasn't until Miles Morales that it felt like people accepted Afro-Latinos as their own thing, as like,
right.
Oh yeah, there's Latinos that also experience racism. But it's also a different experience. And, even me and Ceej experience colorism. Throughout my life, I've seen it in different ways. So you have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge it and understand that it plays a part. If they're only looking at Kerry Washington and Zoe Saldana, like, they're not looking at, I can't even think of a darker skinned actress from the time period to consider, because they're not throwing their names out there. Gabrielle Union.
I was gonna say, is Gabrielle darker? I was like, literally,
a little bit darker. Yeah, but yeah, I just have a problem with the language that she uses about talking about these experiences, and it doesn't feel authentic. And it's just sad because we as the diaspora are rooting for her, right? But the sense that she's not fully aligned in that diaspora completely.
So as we jump into Drumline, we see it is graduation 2002. Nick Cannon plays the role of Devin, and it's like an aerial view. It's a very cool cinematic shot of, like, the class of 2000 sitting there with their mortar caps on. But he is manspreading like no one has manspread before. I'm like, sir, stay in your space. I don't care that you're bored.
Right.
People need leg room too.
He was letting all his babies.
He's got to air it out.
Yeah.
Well, he's wearing a gown. He can't be constrained.
And he's very bored, but his mama sure is proud, as his name is called, with her puka shells.
Hey, don't knock the puka shells. I'm bringing them back. Like, I'm not wearing them now, but I've been wearing them all week. I'm like,
and for the time period, puka shells, such a hot accessory.
It's true.
Yeah.
It was giving me Veronica Mars, Logan Eccles vibes with her little puka shell necklace. But then at the conclusion of graduation, the band performs. This is, as we talked about in our trailer, if you want to go back and listen, I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly, which it cuts a steep.
I mean, everybody played that at graduations.
It's true.
R. Kelly has touched the lives of so many children.
Dark humor.
And so then we see Devin kind of start to add some flavor to the beat. He kind of gets the whole drum line in on it too. And then we see him posing for pictures with his mom. And she's like, can't you just make a normal face? Like, why you gotta be cutting up? Go ahead.
I love how the band director looks so irritated. And I could just imagine in his head, he's like, I'm so glad this boy is fucking graduating. Yes. But then he really gets into it. He's like, whatever, like, this beat is hot. Like, he just gets over it really fast.
And then mom, correct me if I'm wrong, does mom say something about fast girls in college?
She does.
He does.
That is a Black mama line.
I have such a problem. Like again, this is like, I think we've learned a lot since like the 2000s, clearly. But like, calling the girls fast as if it's the girls' problem and like this idea. Like that was totally something I noted. It was like, oh, those fast college girls. And it's just like, all right, when did you have Devin? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Also, the conversation is never like, hey, you as a man, you need
Strap it
to
up.
have
You are talking to
responsibility.
Nick
You
Cannon.
need to have. Oh, you know what? You're right. You're right. As a cannonball,
I'm saying if anyone needed to have the conversation about
Yeah.
being fast,
It's Nick Cannon.
Cannon.
Well, even in the next scene where he goes and confronts his dad in the subway, he's like, I don't have a bunch of kids running around. I'm like, yet. There should be a yet.
When he said that, I died laughing. I was just like, there could not have been a better, just like foreshadowed it. But I just died.
it is hilarious on the internet. That is the one scene where someone was like, this is not aged well. And then also, if you listen to that scene and you think about who Nick Cannon is, I was like, oh, this is a speech from his kids. Nick Cannon. Those kids, it's too many.
It was his future kids traveling back through time to tell him.
I love the idea of his children memorizing that speech and giving it to him on their 18th birthday.
Please.
I love that somebody updated IMDb just about that line. This in the beginning of the movie, Nick Cannon says da, 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 and now he has 80 million kids. Like somebody
Exactly.
had to go and update that in
Because
IMDb.
it's so hilarious to see that line come out of his mouth, considering what he is known for now.
Irony. You know, I do want to say I thought he acted really well in that scene. Like just to give him a little bit of props. Like I thought his performance in that scene was actually pretty good.
The director told him, like, I don't want any of that, the caricatures that you have to do on TV. Because remember, Nick had multiple TV shows on Nickelodeon. He was the guy at Nickelodeon at that time. And so this was like his first serious non-comedic role. And he's just like, I want you to kind of like be yourself. And you're right. I think he did a pretty good job considering.
Like we said, Devin goes to the subway. His dad works as a subway attendant. It's obvious he hasn't been a part of Devin's life. And so he's like, I don't have kids. I've got a full ride scholarship to college to play the drums. You didn't help at all. That's why I didn't invite you to my graduation. But by the way, I graduated type thing.
And he also notes that, and I'm doing something with my music, which tells us a huge glimpse that his dad was a musician and that didn't come to fruition. So
Definitely.
So the college he attends is a fictional college. In the movie, it is called Atlanta A&T, but it is based off of where, Danielle?
Well, I got this off of IMDb, but I wonder who put that in there because I'm not really sure if it. So here's the premise. A lot of people from my school claim that the movie is based on Florida A&M. I do actually believe it's based on a high school in Atlanta because obviously the movie was supposed to be about a high school. But I can say there's a ton of inspiration about Florida A&M we've woven into this movie and I'll layer those in later. So yeah,
Danielle,
I just want to clarify.
How would the Georgia-based HBCUs feel about your proclamation?
Look, ain't nobody better than the 100. I don't care what they say. Clark Atlanta ain't beating the 100. And Spelman and Morehouse, do they have fans? No, they're trying to be. They don't. I don't even think they do. They're trying to be elite. You know, that's what they're known for. So where this movie takes place is obviously Atlanta, and this is a fictional school. But in Atlanta, there are four core. Well, at the time, there were four core historically Black colleges. We had Clark Atlanta, we have Morehouse, which is an all-male school, and we have Spelman, which is all female, and then you had Morris Brown, which is the rival in this movie. Mm-hmm. Now, it is also rumored that the rival school that Morris Brown plays was offered to Florida A&M, or that they would be in that Battle of the Bands. But at the time, our wonderful Dr. White, who was the band director at the time, was like, FAMU doesn't lose.
Ah, you know what? I love it. I respect it.
That's them Vin Diesel rules. Like, I'm not going to lose on screen.
So
we don't acknowledge losing here.
It's a rumor, but I could see that it tracks. But a lot of the people in the band that played in the band were FAMU students. The guy who is Nick Cannon's double in the film and who like really teaches him a lot of his drum skills, his name is Jason Price, aka Snoop, and he was a sophomore at FAMU at the time. And even the band director that they got from a local Atlanta high school, he was a Florida A&M alum and also ex drum major, so top tier. So there's a lot of FAMU. A lot of FAMU.
Danielle, now were you in the band or were you just
I'm just a groupie, y'all. I'm just a groupie.
Group. Okay.
As you should be.
No, I mean, I did a lot of research because my school is very important to me. And I called I have a lot of friends that were in the band. I called one of my friends and we were going back and forth. I was asking a lot of questions because I wanted to know if this experience that we're seeing in this movie was real. Like, did this happen? Did they have these little factions, and were they, I don't want to say haze. That's not a good word for our band. If you want to know, look it up. But
okay.
Talk about it.
I have a lot of comments about that in this movie.
We're from Florida, remember?
I know. I'm talking
we
to
know
the
a school
listener.
scandal.
Devin is on a bus with a few of his bandmates heading to college, and so they kind of make introductions in that scene. So we're introduced to Jason. Was it Charlie?
Ernest.
Charles. Yeah.
Jason, Ernest, and Charles.
Now, Charles' character is very annoying to me, and I don't remember if he's in Remember the Titans.
I think he is, yeah.
I think he is, and he was just as annoying to me in that movie as he is in this one. But they are not going just to school. They are at school a little bit earlier than everybody else, which is totally normal. A lot of the band people go during the summer because they literally have to train. I mean, being in a band in the HBCU is very difficult. Like, you're not just playing music, you are physically being pushed to the limits so that you can keep up. It is not for the light of heart.
I do want to just say this because I was friends with a lot of people who were in the high school band and who went on to do college bands. And then an ex of mine was actually a band director in my 20s. So I spent a lot of times at these things, and this shit is serious. Like, like in the movie, like I was kind of writing like, oh, it's kind of ridiculous that they're taking it this seriously. But the truth is that like, this is accurate to the experience, not just HBCUs, but just college, like marching bands in general. You're there like a month before doing training and learning the material. You have to do constant auditions, like that whole thing of being first chair, like they take that shit seriously. Drum major, like you can have a full ego trip and like it's just tolerated. So there's just so much about what this movie explores about this culture that's at least accurate from the experiences I've heard from my close friends.
Also, I think it's important to note that, like, what I thought watching this movie was like, it's kind of like a sports movie in like the montage and like the setup. And I was like, but that's because it should be equally respected. Like, just like Bring It On was a movie about like, you think that cheerleading is just like this thing that happens at games, but it's just as difficult and just as much of a craft. I would say that Drumline was like that movie for band where it's like, oh, it seems like just something to do during halftime, but these people take it very seriously, and it is an art form to be able to play a heavy instrument while walking around in all types of weather. So yeah, I thought that was amazing.
And I'm glad you said that because the director actually said to like, I think the cinematographer and all that, he's like, this movie is about band, but we are making a sports movie. So you're absolutely correct. That is the way that they were making this film.
That's so funny because I also got like a lot of like Sister Act vibes from it. Just like, y'all been doing it the old way for too long. We gotta change it up. We gotta get the people in the seats.
That's a good movie.
Well, and when I started watching it, I'm like, as soon as we were introduced to Dr. Lee, played by Orlando Jones, who is the band director, I'm like, this is Pitch Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where
this is
they're doing it in like the traditional way, and they're not winning, but they're stuck in that rut of tradition and convincing the leader to change and update their ways, and different new is not always bad. And then you like conglomerate, like you weave together the old and the new, and then you win.
So what you're saying is Pitch Perfect stole Drumline.
Yes.
So it's funny. I had told T while watching this, while we're talking about Dr. Lee, the Orlando Jones character, I was like, there is a lot of classism in this movie, specifically the idea of hip hop and all this other stuff is like not respectable music. It's not respectable art. And he's like, no, like I'm a classic artist. We do the classics here in traditional band. And there is a way to have both. And I like that the movie like ultimately gets there, but we can't ignore the fact that a lot of what is disregarded about what Dr. Lee feels is modern music or modern style or whatever is this lack of respect in even the Black community at the time of like, there was like this tier system of like Black respectable, i.e. the Bill Cosby way of doing things. And then like what those hoodlums are doing. Like when he was like, I'm not going to play the thong song. I'm like, what's wrong with the thong song? Have you heard Cisco's falsetto out? Like,
but I think it also speaks to, but with anything within Black culture, it definitely is a trickle down for what we are receiving from the white community. And a lot of the things that we continue on or push is more of a survival tactic a lot of the times, because we want to be able to navigate the world in a way where we can be successful. And I think a lot of people have that mindset instead of just being who we are. And even when it comes to marching bands, you know, there is such a divide between a PWI marching band and, you know, when he does, what is it, the Flight of the Bumblebee or whatever, that song, that is very much like the high level of what you're going to play from a marching band. Like you have to get, that is a very difficult song to play. And I see Black bands play it, trust me, but for a white band, that is like a normal thing that they play at I remember the first time I went to a white football game and I said, what the fuck is this? You know what it was? I went to University of Florida. I was visiting Jackie's sister. We went to a game because my college, they had those, what are those games called where they take a smaller team and they whoop them. But like they end up paying the school, the largest school pays a smaller school just to kind of like play up on them so that they can like warm up or whatever. So I knew we were not going to even come close from a football standpoint against UF. But I said, but you just wait, Heather. You wait till my band gets up on that stage, onto that grass. We about to tear it up. You know, and watching them white people like, oh, but a lot of people know what fam is about anyways. It wasn't a surprise, but like the pride that you feel about that whole situation. But the bands are just like vastly different. I think you could kind of see maybe there's like a movement to the middle now, but not even close.
So I wanted to speak on this because I thought this was such an interesting dispute between this kind of like old school versus new school, because it's multifaceted. Because first of all, within marching band, classical music is so racist. Like, I don't know if you guys were in like college or high school bands, but like you are almost exclusively playing classical music from white artists because no non-white person was considered classical, evidently. So you are just constantly doing that as the standard. And when you go to marching band competitions that aren't HBCUs, you are going to see all of that, just that classic, almost military type of marching band, like that style being preferred. And so it's just like there's racism happening within just the whole dynamic of choosing music for a marching band and how you display it.
Yeah.
But within the Black community, there's always been, at least within the last 100 years or so, this conversation of jazz versus hip hop. And it seems like Black people were responsible for the culture and we're responsible for creating new things. And I wouldn't say responsible in a bad way, but just like we just do.
Yeah.
We're constantly creating the newness, that there doesn't seem to be this protection of the like carrying a legacy, or for jazz, like it just doesn't seem like there's this culture to protect it the way that like white people do with classic rock, for example. Like, there's this thing of just like, even if you ask any white person today and you just bring up like Leonard Skinner, they'll probably know a few songs and they'll probably hold them in great reference. But I don't know that the average Black kid today could list a Louis Armstrong song or a Miles Davis song, because it's not something that we're like passing along. So I understand Dr. Lee's perspective of like, hey, carrying on that legacy as well is also important. So there's just a lot of interesting conversations happening from like a race standpoint and a generation standpoint.
But yeah, it is generational, because it's funny now that white people hold jazz to a very high regard. When you look back, you could even cite the musical Chicago in the way that jazz was considered. Any music that was Black was considered no bueno. And music. Jazz was used as a way to blame the crime that was happening in this country, and was considered like classical, like you said, classical music here. And jazz was not great. You know why? Because jazz was a feeling. This is music with feeling that you can't put notes to it per se. Every time a musician would play jazz, it might not be the same thing you saw the show before, because they are going to have different movements. So it was just so outside of the box. But it also was a way for people to express what they were going through socially as Black people. And it's just really funny, as that generation got older, that they couldn't look at rap in the same way, because it was literally jazz in a different time period. And
it's funny to me, because I think the thing that makes this movie really interesting to me, and why I kind of really loved it on this rewatch, is it brings up really good ideas. Like, as you were talking about with jazz, the thing about Devin's character is he has a different form of intelligence. Like, that ability to watch someone do something once, just watch them, and then you can pick up the music notes without being able to read music yourself.
Right.
It's like that's a talent, and that should absolutely be nurtured. However, Dr. Lee is right that you need to know the basics before you can break the rules. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really loved, because he says something early on. It's like, we need to educate and then entertain. And what Dr. Lee is trying to do is he's trying to make sure that these kids have a fundamental understanding of where their music came from. So when they are trying to create new music, they actually understand where that music is rooted from, if that makes any sense. So I understand his goal, but it is very much like, we can only do the classics and we do not respect the new stuff.
But I also I always felt torn about it, because I understood where Dr. Lee was coming from. And I felt like if he had just kind of maybe said it it did still feel elitist. It still felt...
it is elitist.
Mm-hmm. But it also felt like, white people need you to know this, and you can't do what you're doing. But he was a genius, essentially.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying about jazz versus classical. It's like classical is being able to make all of these rules about time signatures and keys and tempos, and jazz is just like, bro, let's just feel it. And so it almost kind of comes down to that same understanding of just that white people kind of need, at least musically, needed that kind of structure. Whereas, there seems to be this like instinct to express yourself outside of the structure that whiteness approved of.
Right.
Well, it's even visually represented when Jason is like, he's not feeling the music. He's going through, he knows what he needs to play, but there's just some piece missing. And Devin goes in and kind of gives him that key to, this is how you feel the music and work with the music and make it a part of you.
Yeah. I mean, look, I could say it all day that so many things are rooted in racism, and you would
And
be
you'd be right.
amazed. You would be amazed. And like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, why are you always bringing race into it? Because it's everywhere. It's just unfortunate that people are like in a bubble. They don't realize it. And I think a lot of it has to do with, once you buy into the idea of whiteness, you have to give up your culture, right? So when people moved here from other places, you were Italian, you were Russian, you were Irish, you weren't white. That concept is like something that they bought into so that they could have a sense of like being higher than. But when you buy into that, you have to let go of the ties of those culture that you have. And then what do you have? Because whiteness offers nothing, right? It offers no real culture. It is an absorption of things. It's like literally mocking or repeating something that you're seeing but not quite understanding, and being able to have that touch point of where culturally it comes from.
Mhm.
And they don't understand that.
It's an absorption and a regulation.
Yes.
Like that's what it becomes. And again, I think the character of Devin is supposed to be a little unpolished and a little more, like I said, there's a reason why he is shown the most as feeling the music and understanding, like having an inherent understanding. And my whole point is to say that, like, I feel like Devin's right in the term of, in order to progress, you have to go back to like the feeling of the music. But Dr. Lee is right in order to be successful, you have to have an understanding of the basics.
Yeah.
And this movie to me does a really good job of being like, no, it's both. Like, you're wrong here and you're wrong here. And both of your egos kind of helped prevent you from seeing that for a little bit. But if you can put your ego aside and listen to each other intergenerationally, interclass, like so many other things, great things can come from it.
I agree with you. I think success, I would change the word success to survival, because what is success really, it depends on who's defining
the
it.
definition. Yes.
Right. But I also think it's like they put, yes, Devin needs to learn the music to survive in this realm and in this space. But also it's like, especially, I feel like Sean uses that elitism part that he would get from Dr. Lee, because he knows he's not as good as Devin, and uses it as a way to ground him or take him down a few notches because he's so good. And when, especially in the Black community, when we are excellent at things, or we're really good at things, and we know and we sit in that and we have no problem being prideful in it, in a sense, it is not deemed okay. We are not allowed to have a big head about our gifts and skills. We have to learn how to like not show that outwardly.
I'm so glad you brought up this idea of Black excellence, because I actually think that's to Dr. Lee's own detriment, is trying to be the Black exception, is trying to be one of the good ones. And I feel like so many times, you know, that's seen as like the preferred method in order to make it in the white world, in order to make it in society. But like, to your own point, that whole striving for Black excellence, he was ignoring, you know, Devin's innate excellence that he had. So I just think it just kind of blinded him to excellence that he could have utilized in the band earlier.
I don't think he ignored it. I think Danielle's right in the sense that he was like, you can't succeed in college, or you can't succeed in the white world if you don't know how to control yourself, if you don't know how to read music, you know, like there's so many things where he looked at him and he was like, you are limiting yourself and your options by not adhering to what white people expect.
Right.
And so I think he understood. I think one of the things that everyone understands is they look at Devin and they're like, this kid has it. He's smart. He's so talented and it's inherent. But I think something that anyone who, especially like Black children raised in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, understands is that you were taught that your Black excellence has to be palatable,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to like take all of that energy, take all of that excellence, and filter it in a way where you don't scare anyone off. Filter it in a way to where you are still seen as respectable. It's respectability politics.
But
Is what he was concerned about.
And it's also, again, survival. So
Yeah.
there's, I forgot what the word is, what like the phrase of it's called. But if you ever notice, Black parents will, you probably know what I'm going to say.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
They will, if they're talking to another person out, you know, a white person, let's say, and they're like, oh, your son is doing so well, and like so great. And then white person's like, yes, he is. But then it's like, oh, wait. But your son actually has the highest grade. Oh, he's giving me so much trouble. That guy, oh, I can't deal with him. The parent will downplay how well the child is and will even downplay it into the child. Can't gas your child up too much, because you know to go out and survive in the real world, you cannot let them know that you're excellent. And that comes from slavery, in the sense that
that boy can't read. Who said he could read? That boy can't read.
Right. And to have a child in slavery was an act of rebellion in some way, if you did it and tried to keep them, you know, and if they saw that there was too much capability in your child, you might potentially lose them. So you might say, oh, no, he's stupid, or whatever you have to do to protect that child and make them have their head down. So it's just like, so many generations of learning these survival tactics actually cause us to have these things that are happening and we don't even realize. And so like educators, parents, we are doing things in our communities to essentially that would keep us safe, instead of just saying, go for the clouds, you know, because we know that's not something that we have access to, essentially.
Right.
And to your point, like, you develop survival mechanisms because they serve you for a period of time.
Right.
And so, you know, deciding, you know, how to talk to young children and realizing, hey, maybe, you know, the thing that was told to me in 1960 doesn't serve this person in 2023.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Just kind of like understanding, but also having the understanding to prepare them for the realities of life as well. There's a balance there, and I don't even know that I know what it is.
Yeah, and we're seeing that now with generationally, and that's not just to the Black population. This is happening across the board, where you're seeing, you know, it's like boomers are mad that we're able to go into work and say, no, that's against my mental health, or I need a mental health day, like things that they were never able to do. And what they get pissed, they're like, well, that's not something you can do. And now we're learning, especially like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, there's like no limits. They're like, yeah, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And it's not something we ever thought to do. And it's almost like we're getting a backlash because they're upset that we're becoming so free of these constraints and these rules that, what do they exist for? We're questioning that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're also doing the work to unpack the trauma that caused the survival mechanism to begin with. So we're doing the work. You know, one thing I wanted to mention that I had wrote in my notes when I was watching the movie was that, you know, they give Devin such a hard time for his attitude, but I kind of stand with Devin in that sense of like, you have to give respect to get respect. And this is the reason why I could not do the military. I could not do a frat. I couldn't do any of that shit. I was like, you ain't talking to me that way. I'm not shaving my head. Like I'm a person. Like, why do I need to run around and do this hazing shit? Like that just was never something that I was able to get behind. And so anytime that they were kind of pushing that on him and he rebelled against it, I was like, hell yeah, like forget these people. Like, why are you shaving your head?
I'm not gonna go ahead.
my friend DJ, who was in the band, he's like, it's not like, for him, the understanding wasn't that it's necessarily hazing in some ways, but it's so that you become a unit, you become one, and that so much of the things that you're kind of enduring is because they know what's going to be down the road that you don't really know, that you're going to need this endurance, you're going to need to run, you're going to need to do push-ups, because this is going to be a full body experience when you're out there really playing. Now, some people take it way too far, and I do agree with you that some of these things were beyond just like getting you prepared for the band and what you need to do, and it was more like, you need to follow my commands. I think a lot of that was shown with Sean because that was more of his ego situation than him having his group like the top of mind,
a purpose for
right
the action.
I think this movie is good because almost every character has like a point, so to speak, but they also maybe go around about it for the wrong reasons. Like, so for example, to me, as you said, it's less hazing. Like it comes, like, of course it comes off as hazing if you're 19 or whatever, but it's like, no, Sean says it right. He's like, when they hear you, they won't hear you. Sorry. They're like, they won't hear you. They hear the band. Like, yeah, you're doing good, but the point is for the band to sound good. All of us collectively, that's what we're judged on. We're not judged on your solo. We're judged on us as a unit. So he's right there, specifically when Devin grabs the one drum, the really nice drum, and he's like, you're not ready for that yet. And then later we see him running up the stairs and Devin drops it. And he's like, this is why you don't have that nice drum yet, because you're not ready to perform with this really expensive piece of equipment. There is something to be said about the lessons that are trying to be taught, but it is important to know when you are talking specifically to a young Black child about authority, why you need to give them a reason as to why you are instilling these lessons. Because for someone like Devin, his exceptionalism has gotten him this far.
Right.
That's why he said, they came to me. They said they need me. Why? Because my innate ability to stand out is what got your attention. But you are right. The teachers are right when they say that is true. But in order for you to get the attention and acclaim that you want, you have to be able to join a team.
And I think it also is generational as well, because our parents and our grandparents, they didn't give us reasons. Like children, that whole idea that children are meant to be seen and not heard is like a concept. Like they almost feel like you are, when you ask a question, it's for understanding and not challenging per se. And I feel like a lot of stuff could be avoided if they could just tell us the purpose or the
100%.
reason why.
Like, don't call me a crab and tell me I'm an asshole because I didn't want to wear a white shirt. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like,
tell me why.
The way they talk to him and try to force him into, like, to me, it almost felt like forced conformity, which I know isn't it. Everyone's making great points. They're trying to make him one unit, one team, all that shit. But it also feels like they're like purposefully trying to break him down without, like you said, giving him the proper explanation, being like, hey, the reason why you can't do that is this. It's almost like, no, you didn't do this and I'm going to shame you for it, versus giving you the explanation.
What Sean does. Sean is trying to break him and not like the real reason why they do it. We wear white because we want to get everybody used to being in a uniform, and white is the most accessible. Everybody has a white t-shirt. Like, instead of like having that thought through, but Sean is just doing the trauma that was done to him without any reason. And he's just repeating it because it worked for him, and not understanding that this is not the same type of person, and you can't do that with everybody. And I think we're learning now more than ever, especially with everybody realizing that they have ADHD and all the things that they went through in school, and with the way that everyone learns differently. And we're dealing with children now who are like asking why, and we cannot just say because I said so. They're not accepting that.
Well, I think it's important, Danielle, to your point, because I said so, and this is so important to remember, specifically before the 80s, it was in fact because it's like, no, 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 you are too young to understand the systems at place and how deadly it can be to step out of line. Like,
Right.
deadly. Like, if someone says something to you and you don't immediately shut up and listen to the Black elder in the room, you could literally get every person of color shot
Yeah.
in that room, every single one. So like it was really important for just do it. I don't have time to explain to you in this very moment
Right.
how much danger we're in.
Right.
Just listen to me and don't ask questions. Like that's kind of like what it was.
But
Now,
they could have said that, but they didn't
Mhm.
say that.
no,
It's-
I'm saying like that takes time in the moment.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm saying is that you were accurate when you say a whole generation was raised under that kind of
Yeah, you're right.
authority. And then you get the millennials who, you know, or the Gen Xers who were just raised with the Cosby Show and
We were raised by the TV. We were by
Black
ourselves.
Power Rangers, and you can be anything. So this and a whole decade of I don't see color, you know, like all of these things. So when we got to an age where you were like, just do what I say, we were like, I don't think so.
You've been at work my whole life now. You want to come talk
Exactly.
to me?
You don't just
We're-
get to come in and tell me what to do without a good reason and or explanation, especially since we are so like we will follow instructions that make sense. We will not follow instructions that don't make sense. So if you don't take the time to tell me why it makes sense, then why am I listening to you?
Right.
So that's like, I just wanted to point out that you are accurate when you say why the generational is, and that it really did have to start with us being like, oh, it is not that the older generation had ill intentions. They literally just did not have the time and or words to explain why. And now we spend most of our time with any generation being like not even to a younger generation, to ourselves, being like, hey, do you know how you were taught to do this? Well, this is the reason why. And
Yeah.
we're all like, oh, you know, like,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, being kids of the internet too, like we're used to being able to find the answer to the thing we have a question about. So you can't
Yeah.
tell us just to listen and follow along when it's like, no, like I can find the reason for everything on my phone. Like you can't tell me that there's no reason for it.
In addition to Devin's experiences conforming to band life at a collegiate level, he also sees Layla, played by Zoe Saldana, day one across the courtyard, essentially hollers at her. And so, and it's set up like she's going to completely reject him. But instead, it's like she falls for the thing that she called him out on. Like, do girls really fall for this? And then, like, they're immediately a couple. And I'm like,
Yeah.
didn't even play hard to get.
Deirdre and Ernest. Like, I was like, why is like Ernest begins the movie just kind of talking down and nagging Deirdre, who is very competent, obviously has gotten there on her own, and he's literally like, oh, I don't, he's just so like
He bullies her being the
Misogynistic.
only
Like,
girl on the marching
yeah,
on the
yeah.
band. Like, yeah.
and then for no real explanation other than like time and proximity, she's just like, hey, first of all, it seems like she like teases him a little bit as a way to be like, what are you up to? Which I understand. But then she like sincerely cares about him. And he's like, yo, I gotta make it up to you. And we're together now because, again, I just was negging you at first. And now that was my way of flirting. And you got that. And you are supposed to want to be with me, even though we haven't seen any kind of growth from Ernest nor interest from Deirdre.
It's very much that he's teasing you because he likes you bullshit that we're fed as young girls.
This is another example of how women were told or taught to accept absolutely the bare minimum, the nothings.
When a man
For
goes
us
out of
to
his
be-
way to make you cry in
Right.
the second grade, it's because he likes you, and you
Right.
have to learn
This
that.
is how we get, gaslit into dating men, essentially. It's the truth. It's proximity. That's you just
It's
described
true.
a heterosexual relationship right there. Proximity. Barely any words.
To your point, Jason Weaver is tragically underused in this. Like, this dude
Oh my
has
God.
charisma. This dude has talent, and like, dude, this was little Michael Jackson. This is Simba. Like,
Yes.
this dude can do
Yes.
anything, and I just felt like he was more comic relief. He reminded me of like a role that I would see Omar Gooding in versus
Yeah.
Jason Weaver. So
Funny
I don't
that
know.
you would say that.
I know, right? I know.
That smart guy switch.
I would though. I would switch him up.
Jason Weaver was one of my childhood crushes.
He should be.
Just seeing him on screen, I was very upset that he wasn't around more. I would have preferred that we got rid of the Charles character
Mhm.
I agree.
and just
Combine them into
given
one character.
everything. Like Ernest could have been frying fish. And let me just tell you this: at from a college level, a Black college level, there was always somebody doing some very questionable electrical situations in our dorms. Like, our dorms were so old,
Yep.
and I'm surprised they didn't catch fire, to tell you the truth, while we were there. But somebody had a hair salon in their dorm.
Mhm.
I know somebody was like making full-on meals with a million electric cords. Like, we were
Resourceful.
really pushing the
Yeah.
limit.
Well, I mean, Danielle had Blockbuster, so
I did.
She was adding to the commerce
So
at FAM.
at FAM, we didn't have cable in our dorms. Again, we had older dorms. They every year was like, oh, we're gonna change it up. They have changed it now. They actually tore down our dorm, which makes me really sad. Big ups to McGuinn Hall. And since we didn't have cable, I had all the movies from when I worked at Blockbuster and all the bootleg movies my dad would buy. And so I started renting out to the girls in my dorm. And my business was booming because I never had to ask money for laundry or anything. I had it taken care of.
Love a good side hustle.
Blackbuster, by the way, I want that to be a series.
Blockbuster trademark, calling it.
You know what? BET started to call their movies back in the day that they would have, which was always Baby Boy for some reason. I don't know.
Always Baby
Always.
Boy. Always Baby Boy.
But they had Blockbuster like on a Saturday or Friday. I was like, they don't fucking stole from me. I know one of you bitches at FAM, you snitch. And that's how they got it.
Snitches. Hey, can I say something real fast about that Zoe Saldana Nick Cannon relationship? Even though I felt they had chemistry, to your point about like it seemed like he won her over very quickly without like a lot of development. We were saying in the beginning how like Black movies had this monolith of like being hood movies, and I think that leading Black men were kind of put into that same bubble that was created by Eddie Murphy and later developed by Will Smith of, okay, if you're going to be palatable, if we're going to be the charming one, then you have to be ultra macho, you have to be humorous, you have to be able to say a zingy one-liner that will, although offensive, make a girl smile because she's so impressed with your wittiness. Like, there was just like an archetype of that I saw portrayed in like the Jamie Foxx show and Steve Harvey. Like, basically every Black sitcom of the 90s had that one ultra charismatic, smooth dude who, no matter how problematic, was so just like charming that he got away with it.
But it happened on the other side. Like, every Adam Sandler movie, every white, very not cute guy, not even funny, somehow getting the hottest girl every time.
It's because you're trained to look for his potential. Like, look past his flaws and look at like the thing about like Nick Cannon's character Devin in this movie, or I was gonna say Adam Sandler's characters. It's just like the fact that he's charismatic and he's funny and all this. All those movies have one thing in common, and that is when he gets his shit together, he goes far. So the girl is supposed to lock in, like she's so almost supposed to buy stock low. So when
Mhm.
he rises, she can be like, I was there on the ground floor. Like that's what they were teaching girls at the time. And you are supposed to, what all of these movies had taught us was to look at a man's potential and ignore what he does on a day to day. Just
Mhm.
like, but look at his, if he gets his act together, he's gonna go places.
And that's why
And
we're
that's
at
exactly, yeah,
that's
that's what
why
this
we're
movie is
at
about.
where we're at right now with this revolution and the incompetence that's happening with our male partners, and women are opting out. They're like, I don't need this. And
This is a tale as old as time. You kiss a toad, you get a prince.
right.
So we see Devin at one of their first games. Sean kind of challenges him and is like, if you want my solo, take it. And Sean thinks that Devin is going to choke. He's going to get out in front of the crowd. It's new, it's scary. And Devin rises to the occasion. He feeds off of it. He's there. And he also impresses the dean, who just wants that money.
Yeah.
He wants shucking and jiving, and he wants the school to make money. He don't care.
Can I say something in support of this dean, who I know comes across as like this person who's not as caring about the artistry of the music, but what he's talking about, there's truth to it. Like when you're at a Friday night game, like the people who come to a football game are not always the people who are interested in complex musical
Right.
performances. They want something that's going to entertain them. And I've been at football games where there have been really complex, halftime shows that were also kind of artsy fartsy and kind of highbrow at a place where people wanted a P.D. Pablo song to dance along to. Like, I think there's something about knowing your audience, and like this is about money and generating money for them. So it just makes sense that he would say like, hey, why aren't we giving people what they want? I think I'm not saying it's the best way to go about it, but I understand where he's coming from.
I just to volley that right back, I was going to say, to Orlando Jones's point, Orlando Jones is trying to teach these kids something because this is a college, and the dean is like, well, we are also a business.
Yeah.
And we need that money. And to me, again, if this is a sports movie, it goes right back to this idea of we want to use these children to get us money that's not going back to these children.
Nope.
And if they leave here with less of an education, does it really matter? We got what we needed.
Right.
And I do think like there is this is why I was like, everybody in this movie has like a point, but it's also, they also have a kind of backside to their own motivation, because the dean is right that why aren't you playing music that the crowd can relate to? Absolutely right. But his motivation is not to make sure that Devin knows music at the end of the day. Like he is on a scholarship. This is potentially what he wants to do. He needs to leave college being able to read music. But the dean doesn't care about that. Only Orlando Jones seems to really care that this kid leaves this place with a skill that he can then transfer into a life.
Right. And I think honestly, what's missing for everybody is balance. I feel like he should want the kids to be educated, but you can't have these programs, especially from an HBCU, from that lens, because especially if you happen to be a private HBCU, it makes it even more difficult because you're not able to get grants and financial backing from the federal government. So that means that you have to you have to completely depend on your alumni and outsource money to come in. And that means during games, you gotta, and for an HBCU, it's rare that it's about our football teams. Very rare. When that guy says halftime is showtime, it's not a lie.
Yeah.
We are here for the halftime show. And you will really see half of the, like a good 80% of the people leave after the halftime show at an HBCU game every single time, unless just a miracle your team is winning. Miracle.
Well, again, you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're performing for. Like, I don't know. There's something about show business. It's a show and it's business.
So Danielle, I wanted your thoughts about the step routine at the house party.
You mean how Zoe did, or just the fact that there was a
how
step
Zoe
show?
did specifically?
In her interview, she said that her sister did step. I think it wasn't natural to her. And look, for me, I feel like I have rhythm. I used to tap dance. It would take me a while.
You still tap dance.
I do. But I would have I would have trouble. Like, step is not like my thing. So I could see there being some awkwardness for her, especially, again, she is coming from a classically trained background. She did okay for what it was. Now, I'm thinking for most people, going to a college party and then seeing randomly these fraternities and sororities just stepping in the middle of the party, that might be odd. But for a Black school, that is absolutely normal. Any one of the Divine Nine is going to pop up and do their strolls in the middle of the party, and you better not get in the way of them doing their stroll, and you better not try to emulate their stroll and their signs and their call signs or whatever, because that is like a sin. And I remember going to college for the first time and experiencing a lot of the HBCU life for the first time in that way, because I didn't go to a Black high school, and seeing this, and just, it was like a whole new world, and learning the rules and figuring it out. And it was like, sometimes it felt like people were doing, we didn't have TikTok then, but I promise you, every time there was a party, there was a choreographed number. Every time there was a dance that everyone knew. And I'm like, where is this happening? When is this happening?
When are the lessons?
But then eventually you just learn it. You figure it out. And then you're
So you're saying you got to live house party too?
Like, I did, but
so jealous.
In a different atmosphere. But like, when even as alumni, you go back or you go to parties locally, there's like alumni whatever. There are dances from your time period that everyone just knows, and it's amazing. It's a wonderful, like, unifying thing. So that was very authentic in that movie, of fraternities and sororities doing their stroll. That's just absolutely normal, just an everyday thing, everyday occurrence. So, but did Zoe pull it out? No.
I noticed that, like, she started in the front, but very quickly went to the back.
If you watch, there's a show that she did on Netflix called From Scratch, and there's a scene from her wedding, because again, she is a Black person. When I say Black, I mean she's an African-American playing an African-American person, and they are doing like the electric slide, and you quickly see her jut out of that. Like, she could not run out of that faster, because her doing it's just very awkward.
It's so sad. Sad.
It's so funny. And you know what? It's probably for the best that Nick Cannon was, like, his character was made to be like this prodigy, because you definitely could not make that claim about Zoe and Step.
No. No.
She's a philosophy major, guys.
I kind of would have preferred her to just be outside of, like, maybe she wasn't in the band, she's in the stands, you know.
Sure.
She's a ballerina. Play to her strengths. She did not. And the director said,
there have been so many movies where someone comes in with no skills, but they take the time to train.
She did train. She worked really hard. Like, honestly, it is what it is, but
bless her heart.
The director and everybody said that, like, everybody was putting their heart into it, and he said he was worried about Zoe in the beginning. So whatever we see on screen, it was worse.
I believe
just remember that it was.
I want
worse.
the rehearsal tapes.
You know what? To that point, I'll say that I know that Nick Cannon used the double for a lot of the close-up shots, but I think he actually pulled off a lot of the wide shots in terms of what he was able to do on drums. I believe that he was actually doing that.
Oh man, when we start getting into when we get into the performances, I was amazed about like what happened there. But he was practicing so much. He had blisters on his hand. They all did, all the actors did. And like at one point, Nick, I think, burst his hand like open. It just was a lot for them. So because you have to remember that they were playing against a real band. Morris Brown was, it was after their season. This was the entire band of that college playing against them. And you have actors, you have band members from all throughout Atlanta, from high school, you have from other colleges, trying to like piece together, and they only had like weeks to kind of figure that out.
There's pressure to represent, especially when you're amongst the people who can actually do it. It's like you need to prove that you deserve this role.
And they were not happy either. Like so many people in that space were not happy about these actors in the movie. They really would have preferred if it was real drummers playing these roles. So even though they were in the movie, they were mad. And that final scene that we get between Morris Brown and the drumline of A&T, that was real. So the director, what ended up happening, obviously it was choreographed and, whatnot, and it's scripted that they were going to win A&T, but Morris Brown did not come to play. So they came, that scene where they play on their drums, which is like a sin, that was not something that they knew was going to happen. The director started to get so heated between these two, even though it wasn't a real competition. The director was like, I'm going to let this continue to happen. I'm going to actually fan the flames on this.
On the fire.
And so he ended up getting two t-shirts, one that said like A&T on it and one that said Morris Brown, and had it sewed together. He was playing both sides. And so that scene where they do that, Nick Cannon's face where he looks really mad, like all the actors looking real, they were not acting. This was real for them. They were pissed. And Morris Brown would not let up. They knew they were supposed to lose, but they did not care. So after they did that scene, the leader of the band, the fictional band, had to yell at his people, because the director's like, what's going on? You gonna let them smoke y'all like this? And so they had to go back and redo some of the choreography and come up with new concepts. So like that night before they had to shoot again, Nick Cannon was like really taking it seriously, that he's like, I don't want my double to play anything. Like he really went at it like hardcore. So everything you see in that last scene, that's really them going at it with each other, which I thought was so cool because I had no idea.
Brings more heat to it, makes it more realism.
And like Nick Cannon, you know how like different actors have different like mannerisms and stuff that you can tell. Like Jennifer Aniston always flips her hair with her thumbs, and Angelina Jolie always touches her neck. Nick Cannon holds all of his tension in his lips, and so it's so.
I thought you were going to say he impregnates people, but yes, he does that.
That too. But that's in his personal life. In his acting life, it's just, and because the scenes are so intense and he's concentrating so hard on drumming and stuff, it was just very, very noticeable in this movie.
Well, Nick Cannon is an accomplished lip actor. Cannonballs know this, that he has a lot of training in lip acting, so that comes across on screen.
Excellent. The training paid off. Let me tell you. So before we get to the end scene that Daniel was talking about, we are at homecoming and Devin just can't help himself. It's the drumline battle, and he kind of goes rogue. The drumline tries to follow him as close as possible, but it results in a fight between the two drumlines, and so Devin is kicked out of the band. But then he receives a box of tapes from his dad and starts to kind of develop his own sound and his own ideas of what the band could be. And so he goes down to record some of those, meets Sean, and they kind of get into a drum off, but it was like recording the whole time, which was that real technology, like that it would write music based on what you were playing?
I believe that
I'm
actually is real.
impressed.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Right?
But I will say this whole movie, I wrote it out, right? Like nothing, like some things were like, oh, that's stupid. But this scene, that's when it took me out, girl. I was like, I'm done. Because who fight like this? Y'all at coordination, the coordination with the drumsticks in each other's face. Like, come on, bruh. I don't believe this.
But this is what brings them together, because Sean sees Devin's value in that he can create these really complex beats.
But we do have to note that before we could have this coming of minds, that Dr. Lee did kick him off the team.
Yes.
Because at homecoming there's a literal fist fight, and it's just the epitome of him putting himself first over the entire band. Because he does say to one of his band members, like, oh man, thanks, you have my back. He's like, I didn't do this for you. I did this for the team. And that's where Devin has the disconnect. But Dr. Lee notices that, like, he tells Sean, like, you are not the angel in this scenario. Like, yes, Devin is a hothead, but you had the ability to be guidance. I put you in charge and you didn't guide him. He
tells them, if you have beef, grill it up and eat it.
I saw that and I was like, oh my Lord.
Throw it on the grill.
So it's that conversation, I think. And I think Sean had to sit with himself and realize that he wasn't doing what was best for the band. And he is able to then tell Devin that you are the best, but you're always going to be in your own way. You're not seeing your talent in a way that's helpful. Things that if maybe Sean didn't let his ego and pride get in the way in the beginning, then we would have had maybe a different scenario.
Yeah.
Exactly. To your point, I noticed that Dr. Lee says to Sean, because Sean comes up to him and he's like, hey, now that Devin's off the team, I was thinking the drum should just be 9 people in total. He's like, how long have you been thinking about that? And Sean's like, oh, just now. He's like, was it just now? Or was it when you kind of embarrassed him and made it so everyone knew he didn't write music? Or when you challenged him for a one-on-one? Or from the moment that you saw him? It's like, you always have kind of been playing this way where he was like, yeah, it's Devin now, but how soon before you think that you are better than the rest of the line? Does it stop at 9, or does eventually it just get down to you're the only one who can do this? And I thought that was a really good way of letting Sean understand that he himself was on a slippery slope. Like he was so mad at Devin for making it all about him, but it's like, how are you not doing the exact same thing or on your path to being the exact same way? And all of that resulted in what I thought was important, Sean being vulnerable to Devin. And as we talked about, it's that moment where he goes, look, man, you are good. You're probably the best, but you will always get in your own way because it's not about you. It's about the band. And that moment right there was when I was like, all right, see, this is what Devin needs. In order for Devin to be vulnerable and learn and put down his machismo persona, he has to understand that he is not in a cockfight competition. Because that's the thing. If it's a battle of egos, where Devin's from, he has to maintain his presence. He can't let that go. But if you make it a safe space for him, and you're like, look, I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm going to let you know right now, all I want to do is help, then you give him the opportunity and the encouragement and space to trust you and learn from you.
Right.
I just wanted to throw out there that I thought a thing that was kind of fueling this rivalry was that I felt that there was a lot of homoerotic tension between them, especially almost this Maverick and Iceman thing, like when they would get into each other's faces, where it just felt like there was just something there, which I just thought was really interesting. One thing I wanted to mention about the tapes, because you had mentioned that a while ago, and I just wanted to throw this out there. I thought was really interesting that Devin's dad gave him funk tapes specifically, because when you're talking about this generational divide between jazz and hip hop, funk is the missing piece that bridges the gap of the two. And I just thought that was really interesting, just from just knowing historically what Black music was and seeing how they used it here. It was very similar. It's being that missing piece that connects the two generations together.
I also think that Dr. Lee could have done a better job. He saw so many times where Devin and Sean were butting heads, and he waited too long to have that conversation with Sean. He could have been a better leader to say, and even helped Sean's ego and aligned him a little bit better to say, you might look at this boy as competition, but this is actually a really good opportunity for you to be a part of someone's journey and to be a good leader. We're talking about one band. It's not a competition. You both have, every single person that you engage with, you have an opportunity to learn something that you didn't have access to before. You know, there is room for everyone at the table kind of situation.
And that's the problem with Black exceptionalism, is that it almost teaches us that only one of us can make it. And like, we have to look out for ourselves versus helping a community kind of get to the same positions that we've been able to come to.
100%. And that's white supremacy in a nutshell, because crabs in a barrel, the idea is that crabs are trying to pull each other down, but that's because they're in an environment they're not supposed to be in. And that's not actually how they operate when they're not in that situation.
I love this. I've just never heard that said before, and I love that idea of like crabs in a barrel is something I've always heard in my life, but this idea of like, well, they're behaving this way because they're in an environment they're not supposed to be in is so like, that just adds another layer to that whole analogy for me.
I heard it from somewhere. I can't say it's my
news.
Own. Probably.
That's what she calls TikTok.
That's the book I read. I was reading this book the other day.
So we have homecoming. So homecoming is really important at a HBCU, and I'm sure even a PWI. When you're inviting someone to play, you're going to find someone who's not got a really, you don't want a competition at homecoming. Everybody wants a win. Alumni is there. Everybody wants to win. You're gonna pick an easy situation, right? And but the flip side is that you do want a little bit of competition when it comes to the band per se. Just a little. Not for my school, there was never really any, but for other schools, I can imagine you want some kind of riffing. But to be noted, this idea of like the Drumline and them like having this thing on the field against each other is not something I ever experienced when we had our halftime shows and stuff like that. We would have our bands in the stands kind of playing against each other across and challenging each other in that way. But when halftime came, you had your time to go and we had our time to go. And that was like it. I do know from the high school bands that the concept of the Drumline thing, that does happen. And my friend, I asked him about that because I was like, I don't remember us ever doing this at FAM. I even remember when I watched this movie saying like, look at what they're doing for the movies, because I never saw them really do this at school. And he said that it happened, but it wasn't necessarily maybe as big because we didn't have like cameras and recordings at that time. But after this movie, it became a lot bigger concept and things that, progressed after that. So I just thought I would give you guys that nugget because
That's a great nugget. And can I just say, you said something about, we didn't have the news. One of the things I love about watching 90s sports movies is that there's always like an announcer. No matter
Right.
how high stakes or low stakes. If I'm watching Little Giants, there's an announcer. If I'm watching Mighty Ducks, there's an announcer. And I'm just like, do all of these places have announcers really like this? Like, it's just interesting when they want to add drama to it. They're just like, we need someone in there giving the play-by-play.
Well, for Jackie and I, who are very like not good with the sports, we need that character always to explain what the fudge is going on.
Yeah.
And we still get it wrong when we explain
Every
it on
time.
the podcast.
Yeah.
So obviously, as we have said, they win the competition.
Spoilers.
Oh, they win the classic. Okay, so I explained Homecoming. The classic is not necessarily accompanied by a football game. This is just like battle of the bands kind of situations. Sometimes we would call a classic a game where it would be a game. We have a classic in Orlando every year where Florida A&M plays our rivals, Bethune-Cookman. There are 4 historically Black colleges in Florida, and Florida A&M, Bethune-Cookman, Edward Waters, and Florida Memorial down in Miami. But yeah, sometimes the classics are a game and sometimes it's just like a battle of bands kind of situation, and you have multiple bands that are invited and they come and they show out. That whole thing with PD Pablo, I want to say Bethune-Cookman did that exact thing at a classic before this movie came out.
Wow.
Can I say that like seeing Free and AJ was such a time capsule? I'm like, Free and AJ are in this movie. And for those of you who don't know, like 106 in Park was the Black TRL, and Free
everything.
and AJ were celebs, like they were famous. So to see them in this movie as like the award presenters and as you said, TC, like the announcers to be, hey, this is what's going on in the next step. It was fun, and it was like almost like anointing the movie with his black.
That's why it's like so weird that like Bow Wow, because Bow Wow eventually was a host on 106 in Park, and Terrence, what's his name? Terrence J or whatever.
Yeah. The one who's in all the like Think Like a Man movies now.
Yeah, he's an asshole too. But like they're like, oh, that 106 in Park, and people talk about them. I was like, no. 106 in Park was Free and AJ. And
it belonged to them.
It did. And they left in solidarity because BET was about some bullshit, wasn't paying them, and they left. And it was never the same. It never was.
We did also get an appearance by Stuart Scott.
Oh, yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah, so it made my little heart hurt a little bit since he has since left us. So they win in a drum off, obviously.
Right.
Devin was not allowed to compete, but I feel like there's kind of cheating a little bit because then they swapped him out for the Drumline battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's the same rules that you have for like collegiate sports, or, because there are rules about like you can't, have someone who's not
on
the roster.
Yeah. But
yeah, like I felt like it was like the designated hitter. He was just the designated drummer in that situation.
Yeah.
And then coach promises Devin that he gets P1 next year.
Yeah.
So he's set up for next year.
Which, by the way, if the story arc was to have this overtly boastful, arrogant kid humble himself, him learning how to help out the team without getting anything out of it personally, him not being able to join the Drumline at the end, just being like, hey, you're P1 next year, or you're I don't know, just to me, I think that's a better arc for his character in general. It's less satisfying probably from an audience perspective, but I think it's a better arc.
I think that him, like, he doesn't play in the official competition or the big game, only in this like little run off. And then the idea that something that I remembered while watching, or was reminded of while watching is he says no other freshman has made P1. So
Yeah.
he was already being exceptional and then he lost it. So for
Right.
him to not get it back at the end, but being like next year you can get it, I actually think is like a humbling thing of it's like, hey, you stood in your own legacy, so to
Yeah.
speak. You had this thing that no one else had ever done and you lost it. But you did earn it. You did redeem yourself enough for you to still get that level next year, but it won't be no other. Like there are plenty of sophomores who are P1.
Right.
You were the only freshman to do it and you lost it. I feel like that is something in itself.
I would have preferred if that like the Dr. Lee didn't just say, okay, you can do the drum off or whatever it's called. It would have been nice if his line said, you know what, Dr. Lee, I know that he's not supposed to be playing, but we really need him, or we feel like
the team,
he's part
As
of the
a
team.
Yeah.
Then it would have seemed like, okay, like, you know, it just
bring it back around to like one team, one sound, like all that shit, and
Right.
just being like, he's our sound. So to have him go, it's like having all of us go because we're one team. Like they could have roped it back
Right.
into
the
story
drum
we're
line.
telling. Yeah.
and then it wouldn't have seemed like the director kind of flip-flopped it, but you know, he's like, okay, I'm listening to the team, you know.
I agree with that.
I have to be honest, and I apologize to any hardcore drum enthusiasts. I could not see a huge difference between like the finale performances and the performances that kind of filter throughout the movie. Like to me, they were all like equally impressive. And I just don't know that there was something about like the finale sequences where like, you know, when you watch Sister Act 2 and you're just like, holy shit, like this is like a moment and they're bringing it out. And I
Right.
just don't know that that was the moment that I had watching this. And maybe if I were more into marching bands, I would be able to like pick up on like the complexities of things that they were throwing out there in those final battles. But it was just all kind of equally impressive. I didn't think one school was necessarily even that much better than the other school.
Yeah.
It just kind of seemed like it was all kind of equal to me from not having the full education.
I feel like
yeah.
the one that stood out was the first that their band performed in the final drum off, where they like put the drums, the big giant drums in a circle and then like ran around it drumming, and there was like a lot of physicality to it. I thought that was way more impressive than the actual final which like won them the battle.
Yeah.
One like snare solo sounds the same as another snare solo to me. Don't hate me. Don't come after me.
I mean, I enjoyed just like, for me, I was watching when they were able to do the drumsticks and then like they were hitting each other, so, like that you know, baby girl would have dropped one already.
Yeah.
No coordination.
You want me to do what?
Yeah. But also,
so I have a question. I hope you asked your contact. If not, I need this answer answered for me.
Okay.
Why do some of the chin straps go in their mouths?
I don't know. I thought about that too, and I don't know if that they just purposely did that. So I have no idea, but I will find out. I'll ask.
I've
never
to
seen it
Google
before.
I found why they do it in war, but I can't figure out why the marching band, and it's not everyone.
Yeah.
Some of them have them like under their top lip and some are under their chin and some are in between. Like, I don't understand.
Well, Sigmund Freud would say that oral fixations, you know, from birth.
It's also to be noted that Jason Weaver's character joins a band fraternity, and I just wanted to be known that this is an existing thing. There are actual fraternities within the band, even within, I think, different sections. It's like a whole thing.
You know what else is really funny too? Different sections beef on each other and talk shit. The trumpets think they're better than the flutes, and they think they're better than, and everyone talks shit about everybody.
I thought that was funny in the movie. There is this segment where every single section's like, we are the most important.
We are the heart of this band.
Everyone had a reason. So yeah, I thought that was fun.
I thought it would be really, I would love to see more movies dive into this culture because it is so rich and so many people have been deemed, band nerd, but there's like so much more to it. And I'm always intrigued about the drum majors too. Like at FAM, for I think any band to be a drum major is huge. It's not an easy thing.
Question: Are those the people with the whistles?
Yes, they're the
They're
ones.
conducting the band, so they
Yes.
actually have to. Usually, typically, the drum major is considered the most talented musician of the bunch. So to become drum major is like a major like status symbol, usually filled with a lot of ego, and But it typically is that of just like you were considered the best of the best.
I was impressed that the drum majors were dancing with the dancers, like they had learned the dancers' routine in the competition at the end.
I also want to state that for some HBCUs, different elements are higher ranked at different schools. My school, that the band is what we're known for. We're called the Marching 100. I think at this point we're over 200 and something members. We run deep. Now them dancing girls, cheerleaders, I don't know nothing about it at FAMU. I know we have them, but I don't know what they be.
They're not the draw. They're not the thing that are selling tickets. Yeah,
we do, but at other HBCUs, the girls, I don't want to call them dancing. Thank you, the dance squad, because I was about to say dancing girls and be very offensive to people by accident. There's like a whole other situation going on. Not to say we don't have dancers. It's just that is not like the priority, I guess you could say. Sure. And if you ever want to see like that whole situation, I do think that the Beyonce Homecoming concert is just a beautiful love letter.
Yeah.
She just it's masterful the way that they put that band. Whoever the director of that band was and how they did things was very beautiful. And
to your point, and I believe we're at the end of the movie. Forgive me if we're not, but I wanted to say I want more. Like you reminded me when you came out with all the movies that we had during our trailer, and kind of like Save the Last Dance and all this other. There was a time where like a musical movie was like it. Like it wasn't a musical, but it was a teen movie about music.
Yeah.
And the importance of music and the artistry of music or dance. And I'm like, I want more of that back because it is important. And all of the, like, we've had so many of the arts removed or underfunded. And like to remind people the importance of something like the Drumline is really important. And it's its own. Like I remember like Tar just came out, which is like about the orchestra. And then not too long ago, we had Whiplash, which is just like, these are really high intense industries to be a part of. And they take a lot of talent and a lot of skill. And again, when you understand like the mind that has to go behind not only reading music, but understanding music and tempo and like what it does and how music really just influences our entire lives, like worldwide. I'm like, bring back that teen MTV movie. You know what I'm talking about?
We need it.
It's interesting that there seems to be like a refocusing this like post Lin-Manuel era that we're in of just like having musicals, like traditional musicals come out. But I think Ceej, you bring up a good point about there being that subgenre even to that, about the movies about music, about a kid starting a band, about like, even like Roll Bounce is kind of music adjacent. Like it's just like incorporating music and how we humans incorporate it into their lives is so much more complex and more dynamic than just singing a song sometimes. And I think that this movie is a great example of that. And then you also have like Music of the Heart and like a bunch of other great movies that kind of touch on that concept as well, of just how music helps, even especially kids develop and learn.
But that's this is cyclical, right? Like having those dance movies, having it, you'll know musicals, when there's like the resurgence of musicals, it is very much aligned to what's happening in the country, especially in our economy, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
So when we're in a good economy, honestly, we don't see a lot of like comedy movies and musicals and stuff like that. But when we're in the shitter, which we're very much there now, you start to see a resurgence of it. So it's very interesting to kind of track when those movies are greenlit and like we see a resurgence of them. So
That's a great point, because a lot of times traditional Broadway shows are priced out of a lot for a lot of people. So the only time that you would see movie adaptations are when people aren't going to see the shows live. They can't afford the tickets. So it makes more sense that's when they come into the movies.
yeah. I
Well,
love me
I
a good
think
musical.
that is Drumline.
We did it, y'all.
We did it.
We still have I mean, I would say this episode was jam-packed with fun facts, and I was very happy because the sad thing is a lot of times when we do, even if it's a commercial hit, if it's a Black movie, it's usually not easy to find fun facts, and
Sure.
you know, it's a lot of work. So just finding that oral storytelling of the movie was very rich with facts, because I would say there's maybe 20 little factoids on IMDb and not all of them were like relevant. So that's always sad. Let's see. Oh, one thing that I thought was very interesting was that Kim Porter was the real life inspiration behind Layla. Apparently, Dallas Austin had known her since kindergarten.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. Kindergarten.
I was just like, so that's also another reason I think that they picked Zoe Saldana instead of like a Kerry Washington, because just like Kim Porter's body type, especially.
Yeah.
Dallas said that Zoe had the same kind of vibes as her. So
see that.
Yeah.
Poor Kim. It's actually really interesting because that just reminds me, so many of these people seem to be connected in a way, and it's like so strange when you think of like out of like this entire country, there seems to be like a thread that connects all of these people and all of their stories.
Yeah, it's super weird. Same with presidents. How many of the presidents that we've had are related to each other?
Yeah.
Even Barack is related to George W.
Yep.
Weird.
Is it? Or is it all a plan?
Oh, here we go. What else do we have? The role of Devin was down to Nick Cannon and Lee Thompson Young. Now, after finding that out, that made me, I know, but how much different would that this movie have been with Lee Thompson in it?
I probably would have seen it more because I was a Lee Thompson fan. I loved him. Like, I was really sad when like he passed, because I was just like, oh, that dude had so much potential.
He's definitely one of the ones who I feel like was taken too soon, and
yeah.
I feel like especially now with like the resurgence and the appreciation of all things 90s and 2000, I just can't imagine he wouldn't just be like one of the most wanted, you know, like I feel like had he just been able to hold out a little bit longer, he'd be having like the Making Good treatment. Where it's like everyone's like, yeah, or Journey Smollett, you know,
Sure.
Like
yeah,
appreciating their rise from child stars to adult stars. Yeah,
Dallas said that Nick had a similar energy of like, he's like, I wasn't cocky per se, but I knew my stuff, which is just cocky. He felt like Nick kind of had that a little bit more than I guess Lee Thompson did.
Yeah.
And Debrat was considered for the role of Deidre.
In what world, Jesus? I have to remember what time period it was, because and it was Atlanta and stuff like that. But I was just like, wasn't she way too old to be playing that role? But maybe back then, not necessarily.
Maybe not. But also, are we going to try to put her in a heterosexual relationship? Like, you want me to believe that she's going after Jason Weaver? That's what you want me to believe?
Just even in Glitter, when she was like playing the backup dancer, I was just like, she looks like she wants to burn this dress that she has to put on right now. Like, she looks so uncomfortable.
A lot of people are uncomfortable during glitter.
You're so mean.
Glitter wasn't that bad.
I actually
Oh,
haven't seen it.
that surprises me because your partner's obsessed with Mariah. I'm obsessed. We have to watch that movie together. It's a great drinking movie.
I do want to state that the original, so Tina, I do love that there was a Black female screenwriter for this. So the original movie that they pitched, they started to make some sort of script for it. And Tina's like, I couldn't even read through. She's like, I can't rewrite this. But what was originally pitched felt like a suburban band movie where a Black kid comes to a white uptight school and brings the funk to the school.
Of course it was. Everything about that screams. Everything about that.
And so the only thing I knew was that the main character couldn't read. He was illiterate, and I thought, no way could I rewrite this. So wow. I like that they changed it that he couldn't read music.
Yeah.
But how we got to him not being able to read, because I know Dallas didn't say
said right. And he can't read. Someone said that. You're right. Praise be that there was a Black woman.
And the director said he didn't like the racial implications, or what he perceived to be the potential racial implications of doing that kind of story. And Dallas's thoughts were, he thought the original script was too comedic. That's what you put, but boy, this is your life story. They talk about you can't read.
And like, it would have been nice if instead of being shamed for not being able to read music, that Dr. Lee, and I know it was just not in his character, but like there are so many incredibly famous, talented musicians that don't know how to read sheet music.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like Prince never learned how to read sheet music. Like, if you're going to compare yourself to someone.
Right.
Well, they even bring up Stevie Wonder in the movie, but they don't bring up the fact that he doesn't read music.
Yeah.
They're trying to teach a lesson here, people.
So I did, it was kind of disappointing, especially having a female writer. Shockingly, This movie does not pass the Bechdel test. We only got 1 out of 3.
Yeah, Deidre could have easily said something to Zoe's character.
Yeah.
So, fuck that. That scene where they do the drum circle and you use 2 women going like this at the end. They could have said, girl, we did that. That's all. That's all they had to do.
Or like Deidre passes by after the step routine.
Oh, yeah.
And she's just like, good job, girl. You really rocked it. Or something.
Something. Or in the step routine, Zoe's character could have said something to the plethora of women that she is sisters with.
Well, they weren't named. Because the one does come over and say, are you ready to step?
Oh, so they have to be
she's
named
not
characters.
A named character.
Gotcha.
Guys, women do not talk to each other about anything other than men. I don't know if you've seen movies.
Exactly. Especially before 2014.
Yeah, that's all they talk about.
Or else this would be considered a chick flick. Like,
well, I'm surprised at how moved I was by watching this experience of rewatching this movie. And I'm glad that you guys joined us. Before we get to our ratings, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on social?
At Bruh Meets World on all of the places. That's at Bruh Meets World on TikTok, Instagram, all the socials, and email us at bruhmeetsworld@gmail.com.
And as always, you can find us at No More Late Fees on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. And I'm going to start with you to see what is your now rating.
This is a same-day rental for me, fam. This is a Sunday afternoon. It's raining. What's on demand? Okay, I guess I'll do this.
Ceej?
I'm going 5-day rental. I personally think that we were able to pick up so much from this, and I feel like this movie has a lot to say, even if it's not necessarily saying it well. I don't know. I feel like it's worth discussion, and it was a fun ride.
Jackie?
What about you guys?
I'm going 2-day. It didn't resonate with me. And like you said, TC, like it all seemed equally good. So there was I didn't feel the stakes.
It's important. It's important to like be able to distinguish. You shouldn't have to be a trained musician to distinguish who's better than the other in order for this movie to work successfully.
Yeah.
Am I going to watch this a bunch of times? Am I going to watch it again anytime soon? Probably not. But would I buy it again? Yes, because for me personally, this is a little bit of history. There's a few movies that came out while I was in college that just are just always going to be my little nuggets.
Well, I bought it on your behalf.
I mean, I have the DVD still, so
how's that DVD player working out for you?
Don't start with me, Jackie. It's gonna work.
I feel the same. My mom and I were backgrounds for The Water Boy. They filmed it in Orlando.
Oh my God.
And like the crowd scenes. And every time that movie comes on, I'm like, that movie has a special place in my heart.
For some reason, that movie is one of my favorite Adam Sandler movies. And I'm terrified to rewatch it when we do the podcast because every movie we watch that's Adam Sandler, I'm like, this is fucking problematic.
Especially The Water Boy. I feel like his character in and of itself is problematic. I don't know. I have to rewatch it, but
except I did very much love rewatching The Wedding Singer, even though Jackie does not
holds
like
up.
it. I like
it's
it.
It's not a favorite. Well, if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the conversation, hit us up at our quick drop 909-601-NMLF 909-601-6653. Twat us at the Twitters or leave a message on our Spotify for Podcasters account, and you could be featured on a future episode.
And join us next week as we celebrate the anniversary of the classic Disney movie Mulan.
Such a good one.
I'll make a man out of
you, Daniel. And thank y'all so much. This was great. It did not feel like we've been on for over 3 hours. Anytime.
Thank you so
guys,
much.
you can invite us back, especially if it's a good movie. And I know you guys wrote some down for us already, but we would love to come back and get into the weeds with you on another fantastic 90s, 2000s era film.
Well, we love that. We love you guys a ton. So happy.
And as always, be kind and rewind.